So now that we have our site collection, we've configured our settings on the site collection, and we've looked at the desktop and application integration and permissions there. Let's actually look at providing the ability for your users to come into this site and make use of it. We've given permission to the 1 or 2 accounts of the site collection administrators, but often the tools need a little bit of extra help, or if you're doing the rollout, you can pre-position the actual user lists and groups inside the site collection to assist your site owners. So let's take a look at what tools we have and what our processes are for here. SharePoint itself has groups in addition to what's going on in the Active Directory. The reason why SharePoint groups exist is because they're intended to allow self-service management below the Active Directory level. There are some situations where SharePoint can be given write access and can actually create things like distribution groups and create different objects inside the Active Directory, but most of the time you want that to kind of happen below that level, and your Active Directory people are probably going to be very interested in keeping the AD as pristine as possible. You want to educate your power users on the process of using the SharePoint groups. This is something that can help them very much by managing the users and putting everything in place. And permissions are the primary purpose, gathering up and giving people common groups of permissions, but don't discount that they can actually help with organizational as well. If you're looking at OUs inside of Active Directory, think about SharePoint groups as possibly doing some of the same functionality on your site collections, being able to say, this group is in test, this group is in shop floor, this group is in QA, this group is in web designers. Being able to actually give a quick context around that user inside the site collection of this is what the user's purpose, what their objectives are, what their interests are for that site, and have a quick label. Managing the groups themselves. The default groups are set at the site collection template level. This means that they're automatically populated when you go in, and you'll see that they're fairly simple as you create the sites. The site owners can manage or delegate managing the site collection groups. So the owners themselves, the administrators, have the responsibility for these SharePoint groups to make sure that they're appropriate, to make sure they're managed, to make sure they're audited. That being said, the farm administrators are well advised to assist and help out and actually do spot checks to make sure everything's in good shape as they're going through the different groups. And the user permissions can be set individually. You do not have to use groups, and often lots of users just go in and put people specifically on different permissions. Best practices are to work exclusively through groups if at all possible. The reason why is we saw that individual permissions can become a performance bottleneck inside of SharePoint, especially if it's used fairly extensively. You saw in our throttling we were looking at 50,000 individual items. That's a big number, except if you've already got 50,000 users, that means you've got one unique permission for each one. And so now you're going, okay, that number vanished pretty quickly. So as you're going through there, it helps with management. It helps with actually doing auditing and understand which each user has access to if you go through those groups and use those as primary means of working with security levels. Managing the permission levels themselves. Permissions can be set again for the individual users or for the groups. The permissions available for site collections are set at the permission policy level on the web application. So we'll take a look at that, show that how you can, the web application level can set up what permissions are allowed at the lower levels. Again, it doesn't inherently give them, but it says where they can be managed inside the location. So as we go through these pieces, the higher levels can always allow the use of, but don't have to require it. The effective permissions can be viewed on the items. You can actually see what's actually happening, how those users are going to be able to work with their information. And then we actually have the permission policies themselves. They provide the available permissions allowed in the contained site collection. They can be used to enable or constrain options for the site administrators. If you want to make sure that site administrators have access to things or they can't give permissions for certain things, this is where you really lock it down. Try and be as permissive as possible, because the more permissive you can be, the more the site collection users will adopt the site and can be comfortable with the site. But know that sometimes we know that if it's a legal area or there's particular pieces where information needs to come in but not be deleted, know that you may have to do this for the different site administrators. When you're setting the library list permissions, as with user groups, lists and libraries can have specific permissions set on them. They can go in and say, at a general level, you can do this. You can actually do it on the list or library, and you can actually have it on the item itself. Work with the group's own permissions to allow very fine-grained control with simple management. So it does become as you're coming in, it is giving you the what you have permissions to do from different locations, but if it's been denied, then that trumps all the rest of it. If you think about how file system shares are done and the permissions happen in there, then you'll have a good idea of how this kind of works. And then the permission can be set on list library as a whole or on each individual item. SharePoint goes all the way down to provide however granular permissions you need. The item to watch out for this as an administrator is very often the users of the sites come in and it's all bright and shiny new, and they're poking around in all the different corners to find out what's there, and they'll set up elaborate individual permissions. Maybe not for each user, but they'll set permissions on each item, and they'll work through and they'll do all kinds of things. And then as things go forward and they're no longer kind of playing with the site, they need to get some work done, they'll leave behind a lot of various configurations that may be not as well understood as they may want them to be, or may be forgotten, or the person who sets it up may move on. A lot of times the people who are the most active in playing with SharePoint sites are often the ones who move on to the next new thing very quickly. So be ready to look at that. Be ready to possibly clear out some of those individual settings so you can actually come back in and give a little bit more manageable site for the users. And then going in and reviewing and auditing. While they're simple to set up, permutation can become very confusing. Again, I mentioned the file share permissions. If you've ever had to go through and trying to figure out exactly what users have what permissions on what locations, especially with inheriting and everything coming through, you'll know it gets very complex very quickly, to the point where writing applications is sometimes the best way to do that. SharePoint has some very good auditing capabilities, has some very good capabilities of finding things out, but even with that, you may end up needing to go through and create an application to give you this information that you may need. So know that that can be an issue. Educate your site administrators and owners how to read effective permissions, how they actually know who actually has what permissions. Many times that things can be so confused that users can accidentally go in and access things they shouldn't or make changes that they shouldn't, just because the permissions themselves have gotten so tangled up inside the site. Getting on that early and getting on it quickly is something that really helps them. And to work with that is scheduled permissions audits are key to proactive security management. If you're going in there and you're actually doing some audits, you're doing some working with your site collection administrators and owners to go, let's make sure that what you've got laid out here is what you actually need or what you actually wanted, then you're going to find issues a lot quicker. You're going to have places where there aren't loopholes in your permission schemes, and you're going to find that you're going to be able to fix issues where maybe users don't have as much permissions as they need or don't have the right permissions and get very frustrated. Remember that many times with SharePoint implementations, there are a number of reasons why users can become frustrated. Some of it may be performance related, some of it may be discoverable, some of it may be interface related. But many times when SharePoint implementations struggle, it's because users aren't given the correct permissions. If they have the correct permissions, getting things done tends to be very easy. If they don't have the correct permissions, even a well set up site that's well managed can be very difficult for that end user to actually get their work done. So think about that as you're going through there, review the information, and make sure that you've got the proper settings and the proper ability for your users to get their jobs and their work done. So next we're going to go in and we're going to work through some of these actually on the site, show how you can set them up, show how you can configure them, and work through some of the management processes. So here we are back at our site collection. We'll probably need to take a look at one item up above before we kind of dive into here quickly. So let me bring back our area and go back to our central administration. We'll return to our site collection in one moment. So we mentioned that the permissions policies are at the web application level. So we're going to move over to our application management, manage our web applications, and then we're at our new site, so let's work in there. And we're going to look at our user policy, our permission policy. You can actually see that we give several different policy levels: deny everything, deny write, full read, or full control. These are the fairly simple ones that are out of the box. We're going to start, before we work on our actual site collection itself, we're going to add a permission policy that's allowed on that site collection. There we are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up as a power user level. Always be descriptive and give plenty of information on here. You will be very happy later on. We're actually going to say that we're going to give them the auditor permissions. This means they have full read across read access for the entire site collection, including reading permissions and configuration data. So they don't have full control over it, but they can actually go in and see everything, and they can know what's going on. I'm actually going to go through and give them a couple of additional pieces. Not going to grant all, not going to deny all, but we have the options to do that. We're going to say they're power users, so we're going to let them manage lists. And you notice view items comes in with manage lists. We're going to let them override the list behaviors. So they're power users. Add, edit, and delete. We're very happy with them having all the list items. We're not going to let them approve items. We're going to have them come in and take a look at that. We'll let them open the items, take a look at the versions. We're going to leave the delete versions alone, let them create alerts, and view the application pages. Now I've got the site permissions as well. We're going to let them view the analytics, create subsites. They're power users, so we'll let them manage that. And you see we're catching additional items there. We're going to let them create groups and manage alerts. We'll let them add the alerts, let them put those in there. We'll get a client integration. And you notice when I hit client integration, we got a number of different items through here. And you can see we can go all the way through. I'm going to be mean and say I'm going to deny the web parts, so we can actually see what we can look at there. So we've got a quick little permission policy level that we can say this can be used down in the site collection itself. We'll save that. And now we can see we've got our power user set up onto our new site. So we go back over to our site settings and take a look through the users and permissions and what we need to do here. So first of all, we'll look at our people and groups. We have our groups here. We have our SharePoint collection members, our Excel services. You see we've got all of our different groups showing here. We're working on it. We're going to give a full list over on our left side. And these are the people and groups that we've got. Everyone, Excel service viewers, because I added the Excel services. Here we have all of our groups that are built in. We've got everyone. We've got our Excel services viewers. This was added because we added Excel services as a service under the site collection. So it needed a group for that. It added that in as part of its provisioning process. We have our SharePoint collection members, owners, and visitors, which you should see on just about everything. The Excel service viewers, the exception to that because, again, we asked for it. We can actually go and edit the quick launch for the groups and pictures pages, which is up around here. We're not going to worry about that right now. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new group. Our group is going to match up with our permissions policies, so we're going to have a user group as well as a permission. Group owner is by default the account I'm logged in at, but we can actually change that, or we can actually handle that. There can only be one, but you can assign it to someone else. So you can create the task and then delegate it off to someone else who can view the membership of the group. We'll let everyone see who's a proud member of our power users group, who can edit the membership of the group. We can actually set this up so the group owner is the only one who can add users into this group, but we can also set up the members themselves can self-select. You can actually say that the group members can add others into it. By this, we're actually saying by the membership request, we can say, hey, I want to join your group. And then if we're setting it up the way, we can say, yes, we'll accept the requests. Where we're setting it right now, we'll say no. I want to hear give me your details. Tell me what you're wanting me to see, why you need to be in here before you do that. So, and we'll say when you request, it'll send a request to that email address, and we'll know what's going on. So now that we have our permission policy set up, we can go over to our user policy that we talked about earlier, and this is where the farm administrator can kind of make sure that certain users have access to the site collection. This is available for all site collections on the web application. So we can come in and we can say, I want to add user to all zones. If we only had one or two zones in the web app, then we could have that. I'm going to add in the local administrator so we'll have something in there. So we'll go in and add that user there. And now we've got our power user in place. I'm going to go in and do some auditing and do some checks in there. We're not going to allow the account to operate a system, which means that if we allow that, then the system accounts will not be recorded in the user information lists. So unless it's directly added on the permissions site. The changes made by a system account will be recorded as made by the system instead of the actual user account. This is a very dangerous click. Normally you want to make sure that you've got auditing on what each user has done. Even if you've given them permission, you don't want it to kind of be hidden in the aggregate. So let's leave that unchecked as we go forward. Come through and finish. And now we've got our power user account that's going to go in and help us work with our system. And so we've got our accounts in here at the web application level. So we'll go in and approve that. This is also where we can kind of make sure that we've got our policy in place, that we've got deny right for our anonymous, just to check our permissions since we're going through those. And we'll continue there and go on to the site itself. We'll actually come into the going to cheat just a bit and go to our local host. And here we are on our site again. We're going to go in and take a look at those groups and permissions and users. Go to the site collection settings. And first of all, we'll start at the people and groups. Here we go. We can actually see the groups that come out of the SharePoint default installation. I'm going to go ahead and hit more so we can take a look at all of the groups. And you can see we've got everyone as a group. We've got the Excel Services viewer, which comes in because I allowed the Excel services to be part of this site collection. We've got the SharePoint collection members, collection owners, and collection visitors. So this is a nice, good way to say the different level of the owners themselves, those administrators, those people who actually own the site itself and have responsibility for it. The visitors, people who are coming by but may be authenticated users, but they're not members of the site itself. And then there's the collection members that are there. We can actually go in and let's take a look at the members themselves, this collection. And we can see, let's take a look at the settings themselves and see what the group settings are. No one is in this yet. We're still kind of setting it up and laying it out. One of the things you'll see is as you're putting together the the different permissions and groups. Having a couple of sample accounts is very useful to kind of visualize what you're seeing, but all in all, you can set it up and have it prepared for the users before they get here. So we have the name of the site collection members. We have the information about that, and you notice we have a hyperlink for the site itself, so we can see that coming into play. The owner, so we can actually see the group that is site collection owners owns the group that is the site collection members. So these can actually reference each other, and at this level, a group can be used in the same way that a account can be, or an individual. Who can view this? We can actually say only the group members. It's kind of a nice little tight group where everybody can see who's a member of the member group. And who can edit it? Just the group owner, and there could be only one group owner, but the group owner is a group itself, so everyone who's in the collection owners can edit the membership of this group. Or we can say the members themselves. They can be very democratic and very inclusive, and they can actually bring in other members. And then we're going to allow requests to join or leave this group. If we say no, then you know it's there and you kind of ask permission and those kind of things. We can actually say, yes, I want to have the system let me ask, hey, I'd like to be a member of your project group. That's one of those pieces in there. We can actually tell the system to auto accept requests. You have to be careful with that because people are automatically in and you might want to do some reviews. So we'll leave that as no. And then we'll send their membership requests to just our simple demo account. And those email accounts requests will come in. We go in and do the OK. We've made our changes and we're coming back to our system. So now we've got our settings for it. Let's take a look at the permissions. And you see that we've got the permission level of contribute, and we know exactly where that happens at. So we know where we can actually get the information and what our permission level is. That's not all the information we want to see, because it would contribute. That's something just okay. But what we're going to do is in just a second we're going to go in and see what that means. And then we can actually make this default group, which means when you're coming in, this is the one in place. And the list settings, we can actually change the view that we're looking at here. We can, if we've got our group here and we want to send out notifications, we can send email to the users. We actually have an email address for them. You may notice that this actually came in from Link and Unified Communications. So doing if your organization is set up with Microsoft Link, that you can actually call to those people over the VoIP phone, or you can actually send them an instant message through that system. So you can actually do some communications pretty dramatically with the group. You can remove users from the group. So what we'll do is, now that we have our SharePoint collection members group, we'll add some users to this so you can actually take a look and see what it means. When we're going in here, you'll notice that we'll be able to select the user that we want to add. John Doe, the very famous movie star. Active Directory shows that what's going on. Show one result. Go ahead and select it. We can send a personal message. And then we can actually set up some of our options to send an email invitation or not. We can just drop it out. I'm not going to actually check this one, so we'll go ahead and not send the email invitation. We'll add the user into there. You see it's shared with John Doe, and we'll see it come up. We've got him added into the system. And then we can actually see, here's what he's got. We don't have a lot of information from him for the Active Directory. It was created. And now we've got his information there. So we're going to close it back up. We could actually edit his information and have anything that was provided for us from the Active Directory. We can actually fill that in on the site itself, or we can actually have the user themselves come in and fill it. We'll put a user in on the collection visitors. We'll add a user. And just to be complete, over to the owners. And you can see we've got the administrator, the box administrator. And I might as well add my cell phone. So now we've got each of those groups that has one or more users in them. And we saw the permission levels that we gave to them, but we didn't actually see what permissions are in those permission levels. So let's come back into the site settings. Let's look at the site permissions. And we get a couple of notices when we come in here. Some content on the site has different permissions from what you see here. Let's show those items. Just a quick review, because anytime we see an alert, we want to make sure that everything's working properly. Got a microfeed. And you can see that there are some items in there with unique permissions. This is something that's not tied in with the permission levels that we were looking at. And it's telling me that there are no items in there. So obviously we've got one item in there that's on our microfeed, and what that's going to end up being is that's our here's how we get started on it. This is something that was created by the template itself, as you'll see. So it's on our microfeed on the this GUID, still loading up, and there's no item. So it's sitting on the page itself, but it's not actually showing anything up. So we know that we're okay on that. We always need to follow up with those. If we see something strange on the security, we need to make sure that everything is in good place. This is part of what we're doing with get everything in place piece. We've got our microfeed here. This is the invite and start the conversation. So now we'll go back to our site settings now that we know that that's okay. And we had another alert. We'll take a look at that as we dive into the site permissions. It said that somebody's waiting for approval. Let's look at those access requests, because I didn't think that we'd sent those out. Let's see what we've got. And that's our administrator. About an hour ago it said there's a pending request. So we need to go in there and say, what do we want to allow this person in or not? And since I have permission, I can approve or decline. I'm feeling in a good mood. Note we can actually have messages back and forth. Again, this is tying in with the link messaging system. So it's not going to let me do this right here, but I can actually do, if we were both on link messaging system, we can actually go back and forth. I can ask, why do you want in? Because of whatever. We can go back and forth and make sure that what I'm doing is actually correct. Now I can just go in. Again, if they're pending, go in and do an approval, and there are no more pending requests. So we're good to go, and once more we'll move back in and go take a look at those permissions finally. So now we've got our areas. We're going to look at the visitors and see what they have. Right here we're seeing the permission level is read. There's SharePoint group. We can grant additional permissions. We can create the group. We can edit the permissions. Let's go ahead and do that. And you can see, once again, we're looking at just the items that we have. Note we can have contribute and read. We can have view only and read. We'll get those pieces in there. But let's go in, and that's not exactly what we wanted to see. It's good to know that here's what the details are, but then we want to actually see what we've got as part of the read level. That's going to be in permission level. Let's take a look here. And as you can see, there's going to be some need to work with your site collection administrators and owners, because we can go around in various areas in finding all this information. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to look at the read. So we click on there. We don't add a permission level. We actually click on the one that exists. And now we finally get to what we're looking for. We got read, can read and download. But now we can actually see those list permissions that we can work with. We can't manage, we can't override. This should look familiar from our policy at the web application level. Override list behaviors. We can view, open, view, create alerts for ourselves. So we can do some creation, self-site creation. So we can actually use a self-service site creation to put something below it. Not quite just read. So there's some additional information that we can actually use for this. And it's good for us to know what's in there. When you want to copy it out and do something different, we can do that. But right now that we know what the visitors can do, that lets us understand what we've done by adding those users in. If we want to add another permission level, remember we added the policy up at the top with the super user, so we can add another one here. We saw that there were a lot of things in there that were probably not just read. So read and view. We'll even let them open. Let them view the application pages, the forms like that, but they just can't do anything. Since they're so limited, we're not going to let them view the analytics or anything there. We'll let them view the pages so they can see the pages itself and open the website lists and all the rest. But that's pretty much it. We're not going to really let them do anything else, and we're going to create our really read-only list, a really read-only permission level. And there we go. Now we can assign that into all of the different groups and all of the different items. So now let's go to the site contents and let's take a look at documents. So we basically have our documents here. And so here we're adding a new document. We're just going to upload it from the local file system. And I'm just going to use the standard web upload, though there are a number of ways we can get those up into the system. It's just a very simple text document. And so now we have our content. We can actually look through and see what we have. We've got our files, our document itself, we've got our popularity and all like that. But what we're looking for is permissions. So right here we're looking and going, what do we have? What do we need to set up for permissions? Don't really see that here. So let's bump over to the library. And here we have our library settings. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what's going on. So we can go in and take a look at our permissions for the document library. And we can see this looks fine. But on our alert, this library inherits its permissions from its parents. So everything that's happening at the SharePoint collection level is being mirrored right here. This is nice. This is actually normally what we want to do. But we want to do some modifications on this one. So let's stop inheriting from the permissions and let's set it up here. So basically what happens is changes made to the parent site permissions are no longer going to affect this document library. And now what we want to do is come through and say, let's see the Excel services viewer. We don't really want them to have access here. So we'll remove that group. And then visitors, we want this to be something we're working on before the visitors get in. So remove that as well. And then for the SharePoint collection members, we're going to edit. And we're going to take the members down. They're just going to be viewing on this while the owners edit this wonderful text document. So now we have the permissions on the library itself. We can set it up. Now, note that when we broke that out and did our custom permissions, all of it's working with the members. We can actually come in and grant permissions individually. And let's put in John Doe himself. And you notice come in as the default contribute. We want to take him. We brought him in specifically, so we're going to let him contribute with the SharePoint collection owners. Now we can also check the permissions at this point for just about anything that's here. And let's check good old John again. So now we can see that here are the permissions that John has. He's got contribute given directly, and because he's a member of the collection members, he's got really read-only access. So because it's not a deny but just an add, he now has contribute level access from the policies because he's been given it explicitly. But we can see he's also a member of a group that's got those additional capabilities. So now you can kind of see how the groups work with individuals and working with the libraries and with the items, and how all of that comes together to really help manage the permissions inside of your SharePoint site collections. Again, your owners are going to be managing this mostly, but know that you're probably going to be called on to help set up plans, to set up procedures, and to help your users really understand how this kind of very detailed permission system is going to work.